I am well on the way of making my retrospective video for all the tie-in comics for Revenge of the Fallen. The script is being made, but in the meantime, I think now is the most appropriate time to make a quick little video about a comic I didn't cover in the 2007 tie-ins video. Take a step back with me into the past as we recollect when I said, no Titan comic magazine since I cannot for the life of me find a way to read them. Well, guess what, fellas? I found it! What I didn't know was that a lot of the stories from the 2007 Titan magazines actually got reprinted into a 4-issue comic called Saga of the Allspark. So yes, technically speaking, the 07 comic retrospective video is slightly incomplete, but... Welcome to Burger King, can I take your...
Yeah, a Whopper. No cheese, no onions.
Our first story is from the perspective of Optimus Prime before he shoots the Allspark off into space. Now for starters, I don't think I'd call the art bad. It actually kind of reminds me of the art in the old Marvel comics. It's actually kind of interesting to see a Bayverse design in this art style. He's also very clearly in his Earth mode with the flames and truck parts on him, but it's cool, I guess. I'd rather see this design over his Cybertronian form again. But besides Optimus and the Dreadwing drones, none of the other designs in this are recognizable. Freaking Megatron looks like Deathsaurus. All the other Autobots don't even look like Transformers. And then this massive drone shows up shooting the most cartoony looking missiles ever. Optimus destroys it by transforming into an asteroid and flying through it, so that's pretty cool. Prime proceeds to have a vision of the final battle from the 07 movie. Man, what is it with these tie-in comics having characters do that? The last thing of note to this story is that Optimus isn't even the one who shoots the Allspark off into space. He was going to, but his hesitation and then unwelcomed entrance of the giant drone thing causes him to be separated from the shooting site, and when he gets up he sees someone's already done it. So we can thank this guy for shooting the Allspark into space, causing the events of the 07 movie to happen.
Disgusting.
Next up is a story about Megatron. The story starts with a scene that's been drawn like a million times now. 'Tis a tale as old as time. Megatron grabs Bumblebee, breaks his arm off, breaks his voice box, sees Allspark getting shot into space, chases Allspark. We've all heard this a million times. Except this story needs to be 10 pages long, so we gotta stretch it out a bit longer. So, while Megatron's chasing the Allspark, Ironhide manages to pull Megatron in, and out of anger, Megatron calls a certain great big green tank to take care of Ironhide and the others while he goes back to giving chase with the Allspark. He calls upon Brawl. Devastator? They call him Devastator in this. Ew. I'm just gonna call him Brawl anyways. Brawl shows up and he's all no nonsense, making the Autobots retreat immediately. He's talking with a Brooklyn accent or just a New York accent, I don't really know the difference. The Autobots are shitting their pants when Brawl pulls out a full space warhead. Well, it's basically a space bridge bomb, I guess. Brawl shoots it off literal seconds after Ironhide mentions that it was outlawed decacycles ago, and all the characters, Brawl included, go to different planets setting up the next stories. There's also more stuff about Megatron, but to be honest, the Meg stuff here is pretty boring.
Wow, that was tingly. Oh, gotta try that. Yeah, that looks fun.
The next stories are really interesting and do a lot with the concept of characters stuck on different planets. For starters, Ratchet, who's in an interesting new design, Studio Series 1, is caught in between a war with two factions. Sound familiar? Ratchet himself can't help but make the comparison between what's going on in this planet and the war back on Cybertron. Being one of the purest souls in all of Bayverse, Ratchet actually puts an end to the war and has the two factions negotiate a ceasefire. He also becomes their ruler for a second.
I just took out 2 of them. But number 3 might be a problem. How quick do you get here?
Brawl, on the other hand, seems to be on an abandoned planet full of empty cities. Not knowing what to do really, he just takes out his frustration by destroying everything in his path, knowing that if he just keeps at this, he'll run out of ammunition and fuel. Brawl just doesn't care. It's the only thing he knows how to do. I love the Brawl story. It's a cool look at what happens when the typical big grunt who just enjoys destroying things that we see in media like this a lot, Megatron's pet weapon of mass destruction, is just alone surrounded by his thoughts and how he deals with that. We eventually see a hologram that explains what happened on this planet.
Stop. Go no further. If you value what's left of your sanity, turn around now. The flame will consume you utterly, as it did us. We were a peaceful race, unversed in the ways of war, until the flame became a conflagration. Fanning our own worst instincts, we turned on each other, and made this world a wasteland.
Also, just a side note, this is literally the best thing I can.
What follows up is Brawl's mind messing with him as he's visited by Starscream, Barricade, and Bonecrusher, who start belittling him, saying he's the runt of the litter, Megatron's little blunt instrument. One thing I find interesting is that Blackout isn't among the Decepticons Brawl's mind projects to bully him. I'm gonna take that as a sign that maybe Blackout actually respected Brawl, or maybe they shared some sort of camaraderie. The whole time Brawl's taken down these figments of his mind, he mentions how if they think their words can hurt him, they're wrong. Brawl goes by one rule, and that's to keep it simple and stupid, which I think he might be lying to himself. It's not like these figments came out of nowhere. The same flame that caused this planet to go to waste got inside Brawl's head and took out the worst his pea-sized brain could muster. Sorry, that was kinda mean. Also, if this really didn't bother Brawl, wouldn't it make more sense for his mind to create figments of Autobots to make him angry? Anyways, the story ends with Brawl, who may or may not be in denial, finally getting away off this planet and heads back to Cybertron. In case you couldn't tell, this is my favorite of the story so far. Seeing Brawl trying to keep himself together by not thinking and playing stupid the whole time is not something you see often. And I like how there's room to question whether all this is him trying to convince himself or not.
The parents very irritating. Yeah. Can I take them out? Ironhide, you know we don't harm humans. What is with you? Well, I'm just saying we could. It's an option.
Next up is the Bayverse character everyone loves, Ironhide. Ironhide, already off the planet he was sent to, on the way to a homing signal sent by Ratchet, gets abducted by a UFO that seeks to know about the Allspark. These other beings were able to trace Ironhide because he has the Allspark mark upon him. After being interrogated by these deity-like beings, Ironhide doesn't choke. If you want anything from Ironhide, you'll have to probe him, and even then when the beings start digging in his head, instead of receiving answers, Ironhide just flashes back to a battle involving him and a bunch of Unicron trilogy characters. And Gears? Anyways, Ironhide and his team of bots he's teaching are about to invade a huge looking Decepticon base. One of the Autobots mentions that with a con base as big as that, there's bound to be a bunch of Decepticons there waiting for them. Ironhide, being the absolute boss he is pretty much like, yeah, but it's cool. After breaking through the guard tower, they realize the place is pretty much abandoned with nobody except a spooked Swindle here. Ironhide probably knew this already, but as he teaches the bots a lesson, take nothing at face value. Taking advice from, well, himself, Ironhide decides to take on these beings face on and they're like the witch from Alice in the Wonderland, except it's a little ugly alien dudes pretending to be a higher power. I gotta say, I really love the art for Ironhide's story in which we got to see this style in more tie-in comics. As we begin to move forward with these tie-in comics, you'll notice that the art doesn't get much prettier with every movie.
Is that all you got, Megatron? You want a piece of me? You want a piece? No, I want 2 pieces. The brother always gets it.
The last of the Lost in Space stories consist of Jazz, who for a character is very likable and easygoing, we kinda get a darker and not so likable side of him in this story. The planet Jazz lands on seems to be some sort of living planet that constantly morphs, giving him a bunch of knowledge. So much knowledge, in fact, he's in data overdrive, just taking in so much information about different alien cultures, ways of thinking, ways of being. This is a really smart and in-character way to get Jazz addicted to this planet, considering the fact that in a lot of continuities, Jazz acts the way he does because of his fascination with human culture. So, yeah, it makes perfect sense that he'd get addicted to a planet that's just feeding him all kinds of alien cultures. So much so that he's even ignoring Ratchet's beacon from earlier, declaring he's done with the war and he wants to stay here. It's not until he reaches for another holographic, whatever you want to call it, when he realizes that this living planet was in fact playing Predator. Now that it's got Jazz hooked on it, the living planet strikes and starts to consume him. In what he thought would be his final moments, Jazz gets a flashback to a time where he was also near death, being helped by Clocker. Both are on the run from Bone Crusher. Jazz, being heavily damaged, is getting carried around by Clocker, who scrutinizes him for externalizing his spark core force field, whatever that means, making him more susceptible to damage. But then Jazz says the reason he does that is to keep his bodywork looking buff. Gee, I bet that'll never come back to bite him in the ass.
You wanna be? No!
The flashback just ends with Bone Crusher popping up, and Jazz thinks back to himself that by the time he got to the surface, there wasn't enough of Clocker to salvage. Right before the planet fully consumes Jazz, Ironhide and Ratchet come to the rescue, and Ironhide just starts blowing shit up until the planet decides to spit Jazz out, and the three of them leave, wrapping up the ongoing Lost in Space story. These were pretty interesting, and by these, I mean the Jazz, Ironhide, and Ratchet ones. The Megatron one felt like such a retread of previous TF movie prequel comics. The only interesting parts were when Megatron's not in it. And the Optimus one isn't bad, but it feels a little hollow, especially with Optimus being the only character with color. Next up is the last issue, and we're gonna call this one the sequel to the comic adaptation. Because in the comic adaptation for the 07 movie, Optimus kills Barricade, and this is the only comic I've ever read to acknowledge that. Called Starscream's Militia, this comic starts with whoa! That's interesting art. I wonder if there's a reason all the humans in this look like they're from the Nut Shack. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm the first person to indulge stylized art, especially in comics, but oh hey G1 Bumblebee. Anyways, this takes place after the Battle of Mission City. Starscream, being the only survivor left, finds some of the Allspark powered creatures and uses their sparks to bring back all the dead Decepticons except Megatron as zombies. The Autobots are at their wits' end, and you can clearly see them struggling while fighting the zombie cons, and Bumblebee is nowhere in sight. Seriously, where the fuck is Bumblebee? He's only been in one page in this whole comic series. But yeah, it's a fun, definitely non-canon story you could give a read. The only thing I have left to say is that the designs in this comic are based off the fast action battler figures. I'm not crazy, just look! The next story has much better art, and it's also not canon. This comic intends to tie up the loose end of Scorponok from the movie, not knowing he was going to appear, and then die for real this time, in the sequel. Scorponok's sting follows Ironhide and some not yet called Nest soldiers going on a hunt for Scorponok. Soon enough, Scorponok gets a jump on Ironhide, and by stinging him, I guess, he gets to control his body, so Ironhide attacks the humans. I really like the way this is visualized with Scorponok on Ironhide's back the whole time. It would have been cool to see something like this in the movies. Anyways, Ironhide may or may not have killed two humans while under Scorponok's control, but eventually he does break free and kill Scorponok, so I guess this also can't be canon. So we can call this the sequel to the sequel of the 07 comic adaptation. And with that, Saga of the Allspark comes to an end. Except there's more stuff we also haven't talked about. Issues 1 through 3 end with one-page stories called Transformers Mosaic, which were non-profit and independently produced, meaning IDW and Hasbro had nothing to do with these, and they were purely just made by the fans. This idea is awesome! They need to bring it back! What? But yeah, these can go from either being really fun, like a black and white story through Scorponok's perspective, or Barricade going through his own sick and twisted version of love with a human woman, to pretty lame and boring with some weird pre-war conversation between Megatron and Optimus. Please, brother, this line of thinking will lead you to a dark place. Ooh, so serious, such smart foreshadowing, ooh. I'm not gonna go through and review all of them. I don't have time for all this. I got a family, man. I got kids to feed. Saga of the Allspark is probably worth a read. Personally, as soon as I found out it existed, I had to read all 4 issues immediately. Titan magazine is something I have such interest in and a lot of respect for. First of all, the absolute nostalgia that attacks me when I look at these covers is insane. Not to mention that some of these issues are considered lost media, so it gives it even more of an awe of interest. On top of all that, Titan magazine treats the Bayverse Transformers like characters. IDW comics usually focus on bigger, grander stories to tell when it comes to movie tie-ins, meaning there wasn't much room for small character moments or focus on bots who aren't Optimus, Megatron, Bumblebee, Starscream, or RC. Yeah, believe it or not, RC is actually a pretty prominent character in the IDW movie comics. Point is, Titan Magazine took a lot of characters who I've grown up with pretty much my entire life and gave them moments to actually be characters with flaws, insecurities, or moments to just be badass. And these are far from the only examples. Titan magazines have character bios, interviews, and all kinds of things where you could learn more about these characters. I'd love to do more videos talking about Titan magazine material if they weren't so hard to find. Just from the TF Wiki, I know there's other stories like an alternate universe tale where the Khans got the Allspark, Sam is dead, and Optimus is missing. Skids and Mudflap training and adjusting to life on Earth with Nest. Apparently the two of them know something about the Decepticons they shouldn't, so Soundwave pulls some strings to make them look like traitors, and then the twins are on the run from the other Autobots. And also, more zombie Decepticons! I would kill to read stories like these, are you kidding me? But in the meantime, I'm still happy I got to read these from Saga of the Allspark. If you're a Bayverse fan, this isn't a must-read, but if you just want to see these designs being treated like actual characters, then I recommend it. If you're not a Bayverse fan, then what are you doing watching this video? If you can indulge me to squeal on a bit longer about this stuff, it's also so refreshing to be reminded of a time where more people were fans of the movie universe. It may be because there was only one movie out at the time, but still. You can really tell the excitement and passion in these fan-made story pages. There's one where Ratchet and Optimus use the shard from the first movie to make the freaking Matrix of Leadership. That's such a fanficky thing, I love it. So yeah. In summary, bring back Titan magazine so we can learn more about Hispanic nerdy Wheeljack.